Hi, I'm Dr. Sedna Bokiria, and this is Leader Voices, a show about leaders and their infinite ability to change the world. Each episode in Leader Voices, we dig into stories and sparks from for-purpose leaders, coaches, comedians, luminaries, and everyday heroes from around the globe. Tales of impact and failing forward, of aspirations and innovations, and the infinite and inspiring ways that social purpose leaders lead and make the world a better place. Join us today as we introduce a new guest. Please join me in welcoming my next guest, Diana Morales. She has extensive experiences in the bioprocess, cell and gene therapy sectors, and she's catered to a diverse clientele that includes biopharmaceutical companies, biotech and startups, venture capitalist firms, and academic institutions. Her deep understanding of these markets, combined with her strategic acumen, has enabled her to drive significant business growth and innovation. Her executive skills are epitomized by her ability to develop robust business strategies, building commercial teams, managing channels effectively, and solving complex problems. Her proven track record in business development is complemented by her adeptness at leading high-performing teams and navigating the intricacies of global sales. She has held pivotal roles at several prestigious organizations and served as the Vice President of Sales at OrganaBio, Vice President of Business Development and Commercial Operations at Mass Biologics. She served as the Vice President and Global Head of Cell Therapy Products and Services at Biotech, where she led multiple teams and managed significant forecasts. Additionally, her tenure at GE Healthcare and Thermo Fisher Scientific was marked by her exceptional performance in managing global accounts and CDMOs. It is such a pleasure to introduce you to our audience and to bring you on to our podcast as a leader, and it's very fitting as we are Leader Voices. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much, Sadna. You read a whole lot, and I appreciate you not making any errors, because when you put it together, it is a lot of experiences that I've gone through. So that is my whole life, pretty much, in the last 24 years. But thank you so much for having me on today. I'm really excited. And as I've learned more about your research and yourself, and being another fellow Connecticut, being from our state, which is really rarely happens in our industry, it's been a pleasure meeting you as an individual. It's been really great. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much. And just a great place to start. So you're in my home state, the beautiful state of Connecticut, where I grew up. And I'm curious to just kind of kick it off by talking about where it all began for you. What were you interested in when you were in school, and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. I've always been in Connecticut, so pretty much my career started here, and really interesting, came out of school with a business degree. So I was always very much into business, knew that I wanted to be in the business world in some sort of capacity, but it all started with really just getting in the industry, and started as in sales right away. So my first job out of college was selling space at conferences, such as like the Cell and Gene, type of the worlds. And that right there, I spent like about 2.5 years as I was finishing school and left school. And from that point forward, I kind of realized I wanted to be in something bigger and different. So I applied for several jobs, and my first job ended up being with OHAS Corporation, which is the Medler Toledo balance scale company. And I worked for this great regional director at the time. Gary was his name. And I spent the 3 years really developing the whole Northeast business in academia, specifically, a lot of government accounts, and also the whole state of Canada, like the whole country of Canada. So I traveled pretty much everywhere, and was really intrigued with everything that I learned during that 3-year period of time, which was all in research and development and drug development and, government accounts, and how everything got sold within institutions. So during the time, I ended up getting married later, and during that phase, and a job offer had come from Thermo Fisher Scientific in the distribution channel management group, which was CCG. And I took a leap of faith and left. And during the time I had my firstborn, my first son, who now is 16 almost. So it's been that long. And we started covering all the academia in Connecticut. So Yale University, I was part of that team for 5 years. We grew and developed that account from a distribution perspective. We sold a lot of vendors and managed all their supply chain and all their labs. Really got to meet some of the greatest PhDs and work that they did to really just bring more research to the market. And we ended up opening up West Campus, which was a new part of the facility at Yale. And another 5 years out of that 10-year first part of my life with Thermo Fisher was spent at UConn doing exactly the same thing. We grew the research institutions. We would onboard new PIs coming through the university and just learn so much about the business because we had interactions with several hundreds of supply managers and supply chain, also manufacturers, service organizations. So it just kind of gave me like a really deep understanding of where the market was within research, any type of research. So as the career progressed and as I met a lot of folks in the industry, I would just really interact with so many people. At that time, GE Healthcare had done some acquisitions and had acquired Cyclone, and Thermo Fisher Scientific had spun off Cyclone to GE, and then they ended up acquiring Biotech. So I made a change and moved into GE Healthcare, which was another about 6.5 years of my life spent there in a different capacity. This time I went into more of a manufacturing sort of bioprocess type of setting where we're servicing organizations that were much larger, big biopharma. So spent a lot of time in Boston and Cambridge, pretty much the Northeast at some point. And at the end of the last 2 years of my career there, I was managing a lot of the large CDMOs, such as Lonza, Bio, and just global accounts, really learn about their challenges and materials that they would inquire from us that were a part of a lot of the drug developers that they were, having relationships with. Long story from then, it just kind of goes on because then COVID hit. So between GE Healthcare was when I had, my second boy, Max, who now is going to be almost 9. And then when I pivoted and had my third son, Cody, who is now 5, at the beginning of COVID, he was born right before COVID hit in 2019. I decided I needed to pivot and really think through having that third child and just being a mother of 3 coming back to the industry really just gave me a whole different sense of like, where do I belong and what do I want to do next? Something interesting about my career has been that I've met some great leaders throughout my times. And each role that I have done, I really took the time to learn it well, but also like integrate myself with others where I was learning from them and what did they do, what kind of right moves did they make in the industry to make it to where they were. And I also didn't have the opportunity to go to college and really continue my education to get an MBA or, just going further down the path that way. I really learned and had the opportunities to get those criteria met through my work. And I was sent by GE in multiple times at their GE University in Crotonville, which I had the pleasure of working with like leaders such as Jeff Emlet at the time. He was the CEO there, like getting flown in by helicopter. And he was the guy that you could sit in the cafeteria and have lunch with and never even knew that he was the big CEO. So just like really became really humble from the experiences and just took the opportunity to learn more and pivot from one part of my career to the other. So when COVID hit, I decided that I wanted to be in clinical drug development processes and services to really understand that part of the business, since I had pretty much done everything else from academia to biotech to biopharma. And in the interim was learning how to manage teams and work with other colleagues and broader teams, because a lot of these accounts would get supported from multiple team members. So really learned how to work well with extended teams, which is one of my strengths of really being a great collaborator and reaching across to different areas to really just get done whatever the client needs. So from that point, really just was at Thermo Fisher and CDMO. They acquired a couple of new sites across the globe. So I was working for their BioVector team for a little while and then pivoted to the company Biotech, who wanted to come to market with a cell therapy strategy of equipment that were going to service more the needs of the cell therapy clinical developers or drug developers, or even companies that were coming up with more equipment that needed sort of the technology. And so I feel like I just has been so much in between.
I'm so inspired.
I want to bring up that the cell and gene business is only about 5 years new, right? So a lot of us in the industry that have really learned and kind of quickly made some sort of changes within our roles have learned to quickly pivot, quickly learn and change as the industry is going a certain direction. And we fruitfully have to do that because there is not that much time that we can take time. Like bioprocess is a really well-established business. It's been around for 50 plus years, right? So resin, all that type of work. So a lot of things are, still being developed by the FDA. There's not that many regulations around how to do the work and how to get certain things. So we have to learn to really do it quickly and do it as we go, which is why the last 3 years I've been in different multiple roles in CDMOs to really just understand the challenges from their perspective, but also some of the mistakes that the industry made by over providing overcapacity and really not having enough drugs that were going to be developed and approved by the FDA in the interim. So that brings me to my current role now, where I'm running a team where we are going after pretty much helping every cell therapy developer and every oncology sort of drug, cancer, autoimmune are the major indications that we like to help clients with their starting material. So
incredible. So let me just kind of rewind a little, touch a little bit about a lot of the experiences that you've had that are incredibly inspiring. And the way that you describe it, I mean, it sounds like you off the bat really went into large scale global roles. For instance, being in charge of, Canada as one region early in your career.
right.
So when you were looking and moving and pivoting into these different top performer, I would say 1%er roles in these different organizations, how did you know where to go? Like, how do you go from this role to say, okay, now I'm going to apply for this role, and I know that this role is the right role for me? Did you ever feel intimidated early in your career to say, I don't know if I'm in that, like, I don't know if I have the experience? Because it sounds like you literally just jumped right into these massive roles. And in addition to that, it sounds like your leaders knew that you had something there and they invested in you to make sure that you were supported and educated, and you learned in the best way possible, in my opinion, by being in the field, right? Compared to learning about it theoretically and then developing like real life experience in the work. A lot of people go to school for a really long time, theoretically learn about this is what you do, and then they get there and there's such a gap. So
yeah. No, you said it very well. And I sometimes haven't had enough time to comprehend how that happened. But I think there's been a part of me where I just had no fear, because
of that.
The equal side of that is if you're fearful of something, you're just never going to know if you didn't try. You're just never going to know if you could do it. My father was a general sergeant in the Army. He had 350 men under him. So I came from a very strong background of a family, but always came from a place where you have to try everything. And if something doesn't work, what's there to lose? You have nothing to lose because you give it a shot. So I always have taken every role and every opportunity that was given to me as a blessing to really learn something new. And if that for some reason didn't work out, then there is always something else to do, right? So I just never really came from a place of oh my gosh, I'm going to be so scared to get into this role because I really don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to figure it out. So I'm a very good person when it comes to challenges. Give me a challenge and I love to resolve your challenges. So whether it is in daily life or whether it is managing a schedule of 3 kids, being in the roles that I've been the past 10 years of my life specifically, it's just a challenge, but I have some good sort of rituals that I go by where keep myself organized, keep focused, and I really don't allow for outside noise to really just disturb me from my personal goals and what I want to achieve. If I was to do it all over again, I wouldn't have changed a whole lot of things, but I would probably say I wish I had known to block off even more noise in earlier stages of my life, in my 20s and 30s, where I was still fearful of some things, but like fearless. And I would still I would appreciate the fact that, I did give it all a chance and there was nothing to leave on the table. So that's the sort of how I've approached my career.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I want to talk about this a little bit more. So, when you're talking about, being in these largely intellectually stimulating, pretty cutthroat competitive spaces, I'm talking about your Ivy League universities, working at Yale, Harvard, even the Northeast in general is just super competitive. Like we are on the go, ready to go. If you, a great example of this is, when I first moved to Arizona, I went to Fry's, which is like our equivalent of Stop and Shop, your local grocery store. And I remember I was in a hurry. I was going to like a birthday party or something and I was running late. And they were packing what I was purchasing at the grocery store, like, at the checkout line. And I said, hey, I'm trying to get to this place. Can you give me directions? And the person stopped scanning. They stopped scanning and they started giving me directions. And I was like, whoa, whoa. If I knew that you were going to slow down, I wouldn't have asked. That's
the Northeast mentality. You just don't slow down. You just ravaged right through it.
Yeah, I never thought that he would stop what he was doing and just be like, well, you go to this and this. And so, again, going kind of back to my question and this mindset that you have, which I absolutely am thrilled that you're sharing, because I do think it's rare to have that level of fearlessness. And I think it's really important. I think I share a lot of it as well, where I'm that person who's kind of like, hey, if it doesn't work out, I will try my best to figure it out. But if it doesn't work out, at least I tried, and not being intimidated. But again, so you're at Yale, you're in these Ivy League spaces, you're relatively new in your career when you first kind of started. What type of rituals and how did you, if you ever had any type of intimidation being in those spaces, how did you navigate that?
Well, I think I've always been humble with everything that has happened, right? And I've always had some good lessons learned, like maybe from some faculty there or some folks that felt entitled. I feel like a lot of the PhDs could be very hard to work with. I think the main thing has always been remain humble and understand that if someone is acting a certain way, and I think this is where you have to be a little bit emotionally mature, to really take those punches and really figure out how to combat them next time. And if something like that happens and someone was out of line, to really just emotionally control that, but also learn from that experience. So you can put a guard and never let someone walk inside of you in a different way where they would hurt you. Because I have had a lot of friends in the industry that didn't make it through. Right. It was too hard, especially folks that were doing the exact same thing that we did. We had this joke within our distribution channel team. I have some friends that are still at Thermo Fisher 25 plus years today. And we laugh about saying, if you were able to work at Yale for the 5 to 10 year mark, which we were, that you have pretty much been able to win everything in life, because the challenge there was so severe. The outcome was that we grew that account like 5 times of where we started, in the millions. So it was unheard of. The success was outrageous. But what we did is we again, my ritual was remain focused on what you can make a difference on, and don't worry about what you can't control or is beyond your role. And if you feel like you could do better and this is not really where you need to be, then just do it, and remove yourself from that. So I've always kind of led by those rituals and never really allowed work to come into my home or my life, my personal space. And I feel like I do that with my team today. Like I kind of preach the same thing, because I feel like I've come into a team that's very young and still green in certain commercial processes and going to market with the right strategy. And a lot of them were really discouraged when I arrived. And I always say to them, I always lead by saying, listen, have confidence of what you know how to do well, and lead with that. Don't worry about what everyone else is saying or doing. Focus on what you can make a difference on and really just block out the noise, because that's the only way you're going to become successful.
Yeah, I love
So,
that. And I appreciate you saying, if I can do this, I can like imagine what else I can do. If I can master this and I've done this, then imagine all the other things out there in the world that I could do. And that's such a great way to frame full challenging roles. So in terms of leadership and management, and I don't want to make them as if they're opposing. I think many times when I've posed this question in the past, I say, talk to me about the difference between leadership versus management. And I'm recognizing now that they're not exactly adversaries. They're more so necessary elements of leadership, and we favor some over the other. So talk to me a little bit about management and leadership.
yeah, I think in my mind, I see those two categories separate, totally separate. What I mean by that is I have worked for managers, and they're just a whole different style of folks. And I work for leaders that have brought you into a position or a role where you are the owner of your role. You do what you got hired for. You're part of that process. You obviously can do an outreach on things that you don't understand or need help with. But a leader should be a lot of things. They should be a coach. They should be an advisor. They should be having a vision and provide intel on where they see the focal of the company going or the team. They should be doing better. Help others with being allowed to see what they can't see. Because what I was lucky with in my career is that I had worked for leaders that really seen beyond to where I was at that moment. And those great leaders are still friends of mine today. We still message. I still say hello to them. And they have really seen my progression of my career, and they really have sent notes where they're like, incredible, but we never doubted you from day one, even when you're just a sales rep or an account manager or et cetera. So I do that for my team today. I protect them the same way that I would protect my family and my kids and my boys, and I'm very protective of them. And I still feel like they need to really have to build the confidence within themselves. But unless someone else brings that visibility to them, I don't think a whole lot of us can really see that, right? You need that additional person, that person that can see down the line, but also see what else you can bring to the company. Because I always say this to my CEO today: by compressing and regressing on things, we're not allowing for our team to really give us their 150%. We're getting 80%, maybe 50%, because we're not allowing them to really give their opinion or strategize with, if you were in authority, what would you do different? Right? Just such a simple question. I sat with Kieran Murphy and all these big CEOs from GE. They would sit at the table asking exactly those questions at lunchtime, or when you ran into them in the hallway or walking or in the common areas. They would say, well, what do you guys think about this? And how would you do this different? Like, if you were to do something more creative, or if this is not going to work out, please tell us now, because we don't want to waste our time. So those were all open door sort of moments where you can grab that extra 50, extra 100% of the team to be the extra resource that we might not be able to afford to hire for today.
I love that, because what they did is they taught you how to reframe and think about it. And so just this question, just to repeat it, if you were the decision maker, how would you make this decision? Allows them to think about it by pulling them out of their perspective and to widen
or comfort zone.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're comfort in their whatever their role is, right? So if they're viewing you as the manager, because here is the difference between, to go back to leaders, between leaders and managers, how they're different. Well, managers are pretty much, this is your task. I expect you to do your job. And if you need any support, like sort of figure out how to get there on your own, or ask. And if I'm available, I'll help you. What I've inherited sometimes, I've inherited folks that were so afraid to ask questions or say, this is what I'm part of my job is this what how I'm performing this today. Do you have any idea on how I could do this better? Or what is your opinion, right? Or like have like a casual conversation, because we're all, at the end of the day, we're all human and we're spending so much time in our jobs. We want to be able to at least be kind and, have an open door policy where people can ask questions. I had recently one of my employees say, I didn't want to bother you by asking a Teams question. And I'm like, that my job is for me to be bothered. So I was like, I would like for you to really ask me as many questions as possible. So managers have that idea that they are the owner of that role, and how they collaborate with others is very different than a leader, because a leader allows for everybody around them to progress and sometimes be better than a leader. I don't want to be in the same room with the same people that know less than I do. I want them to be potentially know more than I do so they can shine and make this team like better than what we are today. So that's my goal, really just upbring and uplift the entire team to really be equally getting the opportunity to grow in their careers while they're helping the company develop what they need.
Yeah, incredible. It's so important. And I do appreciate you bringing me back to the distinction. Because like I said, I always frame this question as almost like a leading question, that leaders are better than managers. And what's the difference between managing and leading? And then when I was looking at it, I'm like, well, leaders do have to manage. Like they do have to evaluate the efficiency of their teams. And it's not the fun part, right? At least for me, I don't enjoy the management part of leadership. It's a necessary component of ensuring that you have effective teams, constantly reviewing everything and saying, how can we make this better? And the way that you frame it again is the mindset of it. What is your ultimate goal? Your ultimate goal is not to do anything except bring out the unique talents of each person in your crew, and to ensure that they're aligned with their talents. They're in a position where they can ask questions and further develop their talents to ultimately, to synergy, and that they're able to have a better experience and personal growth. And then it impacts the company in a positive manner because they're putting in, their talents, their true talents.
The other token to that is, before it leaves my thoughts, is that as a good leader, I think having some transparency really just goes a long way with the team, because the minute the team feels that you're holding information back or you're not being transparent with what the situation and state of the business is, this is where some leaders go wrong, right? If you make your team feel inclusive in that decision-making process, where you're coming from a place of saying, this is our number. For example, we all have a commercial goal. This is how we survive and make the company move forward. This is our goal, but this is not just your goal. This is our goal. I am included in that. My CEO is included in that. And how we get to the goal is by all working different angles of the business to get to that number. This is not like you get your $10 million, you figure out how you're going to get there, and you already are stressed out and you haven't even started your work.
Right.
So I always say to my leadership, let's be transparent about, because it really goes a long way when they're all feeling like we're moving in the same steps and we're not like just regressing by saying, this is what we're going to give you, and then you guys figure it out. So I'm very hands-on with everything that happens operationally within my team on a weekly basis, daily basis. I have a lot of touch points with my team. My team is very comfortable to call me at any time. And this is not just here, but you can call anybody that's probably has worked for me in the last 5 years. At Mass Biologics, we had to close down our operation because we were going to be sold. And I lost my team, which I had just built and started the process. So that was like the hardest thing I had ever had to do, to walk away from that. But when I left, like the feedback and everything that I received was just so tremendous that it kind of like stayed with me for a while, and just really just gave me some lessons learned that no matter, like, if you remain humane during the process, no matter if it's like a hard decision or an easy decision and you're successful, great. But it's how you deal with people when times are hard and one of the most difficult situations hit you is really what stays with people and how they remember you by. So that is something in my personal life and my career.
Right. And so to kind of switch gears a little bit, but it's along the same genre of subject matter. It sounds like you grew up in a military family. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, my father. Yep.
So when I hear you talking about your leadership, you're talking about one unit, high trust, high transparency, functioning as almost as a singular entity, obviously with individuals comprising that, but having that end goal as an individual and as a company. So it almost makes me think of, like a military type of, but in the most positive way of that family and that unity and the shared collective perspective of growth. And so talk to me, let's switch gears a little bit to talk about motherhood, parenthood, and just transitions throughout your careers. I feel like as I grow, there's this inevitable identity development that I go through as a daughter, thinking about my parents getting older, as a mother, which, is something I didn't know anything about before I became one, and no one could have prepared me for it. Talk to me a little bit about how you manage those transitions and the different identities and the different hats.
Yeah, it's been part of the path. I feel like there's been multiple sort of switch points. Another child comes into the world, the responsibility changes. Thankfully, my partner, my husband, he's been there for the entire ride. So a lot of times I think it's been hardest on him because he had to learn how to pivot our lifestyle and really become more of a giver and take care of the kids as I was traveling more at certain times. It's really interesting because one part kind of feeds into the other. Like you are great because you're providing a great lifestyle to your family, but then you're sort of taking things, it's the balancing act, right? Taking away time. So recently, in the last few years, I kind of became selfish on the time that I'm willing to give to an employer.
Mm.
And I kind of have taken a little bit of more control. I felt like for the first 20 years of my career, I had to give up a lot of things in order to develop and learn and do all of the great things. I think I've come to the conclusion that I've gotten to where I would like to be, and I am, but not to say that I've dropped the mic and I have moved on and really not going to pursue anything else. Because my husband always says, "Is this it? Is this the last one? Are you going to move forward to something else? What is next for you?" Because he's like, "I just feel like you just keep doing this and you're off to some new thing." And I always say to him, I'm like, the only time I'll stop is when I'm no longer breathing. Because I feel like if I stop trying on something, then that's not going to be who I am. That's not who I was made to be. So, and I teach the same to my children, to never be allowed to switch who they are, to never be allowed to have their personalities change just to satisfy a cubicle equation, whether it is school or sports. Sure. Always be competitive, always push through, always work hard, always be kind. So I lead with those type of ethics at home. Same, I have three boys. They're growing up in different generations since I had my first one. So I feel like he's the older with like the more sort of strong background, really knows a lot of the grandparents when they were younger. So he had like a lot of that support from the family. Different with the younger ones and how everything has changed with the world nowadays. So it's a little bit, I feel like I need to spend more time with them, with the little ones, because of how much society has changed. And I want to be present to be the informant of everything that is happening in life and not get the information from the outside sources, because ultimately they're my children and I want to be a part of their upbringing and who they become as humans. And sure. The hope that I have as a mother is to really showcase to them that if their mother could do something like this and could be this individual that was fearless and could push through and be never afraid to take a chance, if they can take a glimpse of that, like I'll be considering myself a winner.
It's such a beautiful thing, the way in which you put it, in that I feel that technology is there's so many messages that the younger kids have, right? And they are coming from all these different places. And so really recognizing that you want to be a central part of the message, because you know that there's so many things. And I struggle with that as well, where it's a priority to say, hey, I want to make sure that the messaging that I have to share with my son is really prevalent in his life.
And what we're doing with that is taking a lot of time away from ourselves. Like I said, my husband and I really, my husband is a football coach for the school. He dedicates like 8 months out of his life to the program. We coached our little one in Little League. We did baseball together this past year. Like, we're just being more involved in the community, making sure that our kids are seeing us around and really just not remove ourselves from what their day life looks like. So I have become a little bit more sort of selfish to my time management when it comes to my family, and I put that first. So no matter where I work for now, all my jobs, really, this is the first conversation I have. Like, I know what I'm able to do for you, but what I need you to understand is that my family comes first. So unless we're not aligned there, like, I don't want to work for you, because that's just not, I'm not willing to give that up.
Right. So that kind of connects to this question that I have, and it's a question about decades. So if you were to break it down decade by decade, the advice you would give the previous decade of your life, break that up for me. You did a little bit already.
Yeah. Like, you know how they say, like, when you hit your 40s, like, you wish you knew that in your 20s?
Yes.
Well, that's life, right? So I was lucky enough to have, like, certain people that come into, you know, they say, like, God sends certain people to your life at a certain time to help you or really understand who you don't want to be with, right? Or around.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've been lucky to have had those type of people walk into my life that have really given me an understanding where I want to go next. So I just wish that for my children. So I would tell myself now, and in my 30s, I wish I knew what I knew in my 40s back in my 30s. And not that I would do anything different to pivot my career in a certain different direction, because this was the direction that I seeked. And I worked super hard to make sure I stayed on that line that I wanted to go. And what the path has taught me is to really, because life is too short, like, really make sure that when you enter a certain path and you feel like that's not the right path, or someone is in your way that's not kind and you don't want to be around with, just make sure that you don't allow for yourself to be involved in that, and just remove yourself from all of it together. And it's your life. You choose your path. And we all have choices to make every day, and it's the choices that we make. Who says they have to be a certain way, right? You can choose your own direction. And so I wish I kind of knew that in my 20s, right? You can, even then, when I was totally fearless and I knew nothing about this industry, I kind of just went in, right? But I wish I had, like, more of a pivotal, like, approach in things, or knew a lot more, but you don't get to learn a lot more unless you go through the process. Right. But yeah, I would say pretty much just block the outside noise even more would be what I would advise every person that's in their younger ages and they're trying to take a direction in their careers or even their life, generally speaking. With sports, like, I advise my son all the time on, like, things that make him happy and what he wants to work at best and what he values himself to be. So I always say, like, pick your friends to be better than yourself, because what are you going to learn from a friend that's not as good as you are? Pretty much nothing. So you're just dedicating your time to friends that are not bringing anything to the value. And I always lead with, like, if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room, and you just have to pick a new set of friends and new set of colleagues and just move on.
Yeah, that's brilliant, brilliant advice. And I'm really grateful that you're sharing it. It's this concept of you are the average of the 6 people that you're spending the most time with. And so if you're investing in people, your time, right? Time is the one thing that you cannot
get back, right?
In people who are not uplifting you or supporting you or serving you, or not challenging you. I think that's a big part of it, where it's like, if you're around people who are smarter than you, they're going to challenge you to think differently. And I spent a lot of time in my 20s, 30s, being in rooms where I was the smartest person in the room. And I say that in a non-arrogant way, just kind of transparently. I know it sounds super arrogant.
No, it's not. It's just the reality, right?
Yeah, like it is part, you know, when I was in my 20s, it was, you know, definitely part egotistical and competitive. And I was in these rooms with people, knowing that, but I have to say, like, I would try to say, hey, here's something you can do. Here's something you can do. And it's because I have this inherent desire, or I had more of a stronger desire at that point in my life to be liked. So I thought if I could help them, they will like me. If I can show them how easy it is to do X, Y, and Z, they'll like me and I will be, accepted. And it was such a disservice to me because I wasted so much energy.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard because, you do grow and you don't know unless you are in it. And then
Right.
now, I think about just how much more fulfilled I am in my life compared to my 20s and my 30s. And it's
But to all honesty, if you hadn't gone through that, you would have not known that you never want to be in that position again, right? So it's also the part of the experience that we all have to get through, unfortunately.
Yeah.
With living the situation or the scenario and saying, okay, never again will I ever do that, or never again will I be in that position. And I've had some pivotal moments where that has happened in my career, and I'm like, nope, this is where I just draw this hard line. I say there is a hard line in the sand, and I'm not going to surpass it.
Right. Right. So your space the cell and gene therapy space, kind of circling back, it's so fast paced. How do you stay on top of such an innovative field without getting overwhelmed by all the trends and new things? Like, how do you stay on track?
We honestly have to go really by what the FDA really is setting for ground rules for these therapies to come into the market, because in my position right now, we only manage starting material that we can dedicate to a client to work with them in process development. Then we go into manufacturing, then they go into clinical trials. So we're with them in the journey of research, process development, and manufacturing. And we have GMP products and practices. We have a GMP facility that is validated. So we really stay in tune with what the FDA is really requiring from these industries or from the biotech biopharma as a criteria, because we have to be a part of that, and we have to be an entity that FDA is going to sign off on. Okay, great. You work with OrganaBio. They have other GMP requirements. They're qualified vendor, et cetera. So that helps us really just keep us in line with what we're doing. And the industry is growing. Obviously, there is multi-billion-dollar industry that's supposed to even skyrocket in the next 5 years as more therapies come into fruition. And with the approvals, it's just great, like seeing how many lives these therapies have saved. And to be a really small part of that process is really humbling. As we all have been touched at some point by it. My husband has an autoimmune disease. We've lost people to cancer in our family. Heart disease, any indications of oncologies, somebody can't say they haven't been touched by it. So any help that we can give through our work to really make these developers get more drugs quickly to save more lives and patients is what our goal is every day. That's why we come to work, which has been part of one of the things that has kept me going in the industry and in this track, and really not shifted to other things. Because there's always been something that has happened that has just been a pivotal moment where we're like, wow, that happened. And we were part of that process. And we helped that company get that drug, and they just got IND approval. So it's been very humbling being a part of that formula.
Yes, that was actually my next question. So there's such a vast potential in different disease states for cell and gene therapy. For anyone out there, like, kind of explain it as if you're talking to like a sixth grader. And I think most sixth graders are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. But what is cell and gene therapy, and what are some of the potential benefits for the world in the way in which you just framed it?
So there's cell therapies that they take your own cells from a donor-based material. So you donate blood through Red Cross or any of these institutions. They collect certain material. They send it to the manufacturer of the drug. They implement their own things to the medicine and the bag itself. Then they test it on a patient in the clinical trials. And if they're successful, then they will go for approval. If they get approved, then it goes into the market and it gets to the patients. With gene therapies, there's different avenues of getting there. Right now, there is viral vector avenues. There is, lentiviruses that they're doing some of the work with. There's different ways of performing the gene therapies through different processes. But I feel like even there, like FDA, there's a bunch of requirements, but not really thoroughly stated that this is how this process from step 1 to 10 should happen. So it's for the developers to really figure it out as they go along and making sure they're on track. So a lot of checkpoints and check marks with the FDA all along. And cell therapies, I think, is been a passion of mine, specifically because of how quickly it can happen. You can get to market faster. And even on the trial side, like I know tons of patients have gotten certain medications on the autoimmune diseases that was approved for a different indication, and then they were able to give it to another patient with another indication that was successful, and that patient survived, right? So there's a lot of those cases that have come into fruition that I'm just still surprises me how much is exponentially moving fast and furious. So I'm happy to be a part of this world because it is still new and we're learning and hoping that we're doing all the right things to get as many developers to come to market quicker.
So one of the things that's really intriguing about you and inspiring again, because you have such a vast experience across the gamut, right? So from academic institutions to startups, biotech, what do they all have in common? And how does it feel kind of being like you have so much knowledge to be able to experience all those different elements all the way up to venture capitalists?
Yeah, honestly, they're all very different, right? Big biopharma, they have like global roles and global goals and global portfolios that they manage. So they have to, really understand at the beginning of the year what they want to push forward and what their budgeting is aligned for one thing versus the other. So how we work with big biopharma is with global procurement, seeing like if they want to do starting material for all their sites. A lot of these places will send their business out to bid. So you have to understand, that's where my distribution background comes in because I understand all of that thoroughly. Being able to go to accounts from different angles, because sometimes you can't get in through the front door. So you have to figure out how to get from the back door. And how you utilize a different resource, whether it is a purchasing manager or someone that sits at the bench and is processing cells and doing the actual work, or a CSO or a CTO, someone that has technology sort of goals. Every individual that sits at all of these accounts have different types of goals, but the main goal is to get the drug to market first. So with the smaller biotechs, the challenge is the funding, because they're going to be looking for the most discounts and be frugal with how they spend their money because they only have so much funding to get a drug to go to the next phase. So we manage those accounts a little bit differently. And with venture capitalists, typically those guys are looking at, spinning off companies or getting companies to come out that could collaborate with someone that they see a connection with the industry to get them started and going. So they're all so much different from one another with similar goals, but different structures of how they're set up also. So I've been thankful, and lucky to be a part of these discussions, whether from an acquisition part of sale, which I've been through so many acquisitions in my lifetime. Like I know how that works and the timing that it takes to have a full implementation, and also be a part of the sales cycle from like bottoms up. Because literally I've done it all from walking into labs to labs and really finding the sales and the lead for the day and what they're going to be buying for the month to, multi-million-dollar deals and large orders from big biopharmas that have led to bigger things.
So my last point is I hope that you take time to write a book or just take time to say, can you believe how much I've done and all the different things that I've learned and the way in which I've really made the world a better place through your work and your.
That's very kind of you. Like I never consider myself that, that interesting or popular because, I'm pretty private, generally speaking, when it comes to things. But a couple of recent approaches have been towards a book. And I was like thinking, how great would it be? With my background, I came from a different country, probably was, like you say, the 1 percentile. It wasn't going to make it in this world. And just, look at how much I've achieved. So I'm very proud of that. But definitely it's not something that I will exclude off my list. Like my husband says, what else are you going to do next? I'm sure I'll figure something new out to keep me occupied.
How can we follow you and just, keep understanding where you're going and what's next?
I'm on LinkedIn, obviously through OrganaBio, as I'm their VP of sales, but I've also started my own sort of consulting firm that I started between jobs, in the last year and a half, the dmconsulting.com. So I have a website, which I'm still building and kind of rebranding myself there for a future timeline, because you just never know what's going to happen next.
Well, anyone that has the pleasure of utilizing your brain, I'm telling you, you name your price, because they are getting so much talent and so much experience and so much understanding of the landscape from here all the way to there. And I know you know that, and I hope they know that. And I hope that for anyone who watches this, they can really see how inspirational you are and what an honor it is to have you on the show. Any place where we can follow you, we'll have it in our show notes. So anyone listening can just kind of go to our show notes and click on her LinkedIn and just keep watching you and seeing what's next.
Thank you so much, Donna, for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for joining us. I'm Dr. Sedna Bokiria, and this is Leader Voices. This show is brought to you by the American Express Leadership Academy Alumni Network and leaderstories.org. Leader Voices is audio engineered by Robbie Ladd and produced by Creepandy and team at OTVO Digital. Special thanks to Caitlin Johnson and Michael Chang. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.